There's a recurring pattern in history. Whenever wine consumption drops, we dig out old stories of the benefits of wine consumption and why wine basically is healthy. And especially when you read articles that start with even the ancient Greeks and Romans knew that wine can have a beneficial effect on health, you know it's getting serious again. The problem is, usually we only look on specific studies that have been proven wrong over the last 30 to 40 years, but we forget about having a deeper dive into what really is behind those stories. And two recent articles in the drinks business and on Wine Plus in Germany made me record this episode. And this episode is not about dogmatization or condemnation of alcohol. It's more about the fact that we have to stop claiming that there is a healthy effect while drinking alcohol and rather start enlightening our society, our customers, what the real benefits are, and that, like everything, it's more about balance and enjoyment in life. And this is what this episode is about. Have fun. Welcome to the Pinot Pixel podcast episode number 173, and today we have a really serious topic. How healthy is wine consumption? The starting signal for this episode was an article in the drinks business with the name Scientific Studies Showing the Health Benefits of Wine. And I mean, this is this recurring pattern in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. Whenever wine consumption saw a drop, they started talking about studies that prove that there is a beneficial effect on wine consumption. And this article talks about everything. And the base for all those claims is three main studies, three main articles over the last 50 years. The first is called the J-Curve by Leader and Cochrane, and it's from 1979, and it's called Factors Associated with Cardiac Mortality in Developed Countries, with particular reference to the consumption of wine. The second one is the so-called resveratrol claim. It's called The Concentration of the Phytolactyl Resveratrol in Wine by Seaman and Creasy from 1992. And then there is the third one, which is today called the French Paradox by three Frenchmen, Richard Cambien and Ducimetière. And the title of the study was Epidemiologic Characteristics of Coronary Disease in France. And those three articles are usually the base for the argumentation pro wine consumption when it comes to health benefits, to a healthier lifestyle. And we will talk about them in a second. But before we start with this, I want to give you two main things to think about. First of all, no matter what studies have been out there, the American Heart Association always says no research has ever established a cause and effect link between drinking alcohol and better health. No study ever. There are no long-term studies. Nothing at all has ever proven that this is good for your health. We will talk about many studies in a second, but none of them have ever proven a beneficial effect. That is a fact. And the second thing, before we dive deeper into the wine thing, is I want to give you another example. It might be easier to understand then. When we talk about mushrooms in general, mushrooms usually are edible. Mushrooms as a class of food, as a class of plant, are known that they're a reliable source for vitamin B, C, and D, fiber, minerals including potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and they're also a good source for protein. And of course, we all know those positive effects for energy, for red cell production, for cell protection against damages, and of course, I mean, protein for the building up of muscles, everything. This is what usually can happen when you consume mushrooms. And then there's mushrooms like the fly agaric or the death cap mushroom that also have all those benefits, but when you eat a meal with them, you die. And maybe it's easier for humans to catch this up because they know when I eat this meal, I won't be there the next morning. It's closer, it's easier, it's faster to adapt for your brain. I don't know. But basically, all those studies we're going to talk about in wine are talking about the same thing. There is ingredients that are good for your health and that have proven to be good for your health. But on the other side, there's a substance called alcohol, which basically is the poison that is also part of those, an ingredient of those mushrooms that are bad for your health. And of course, the long-term effect is a different one than the poison in mushrooms, but basically there is this effect. In addition, talking about the other part of intoxication, in India, in Siberia, there have been ancient tribes hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, that also have dealt with conscious intoxication when it comes to mushrooms, because they wanted to have this ecstatic feeling, this ecstatic state of body and mind, especially when it comes to cults. Even in recent years, there has been a rise in the US of microdosing and tripping on mushrooms because people love to have this ecstatic feeling when it comes to consumption of slightly poisonous mushrooms. Keep in mind what ingredients mushrooms can have that can be beneficial for your health and what also can happen if you have too much of the poison that is ingredient of some of them. And right now, we talk about wine. And let's try to talk about those three basic studies and look on them from both sides and trying to also demystify what is behind them. When we talk about the J curve, so the factors associated with the cardiac mortality, basically it's called the J curve study because what it showed is a graph where you basically can see when the consumption of alcoholic beverages rise, the mortality and the health risks also rise. But there is a small part, especially in the beginning of the curve, where you're abstinent. So abstinence is when you consume no alcohol at all. There is less health risks and mortality when you drink some alcohol. So when you drink moderately, there's a lower risk for mortality and health. And then, of course, it starts rising with more and more consumption up to, probably death and liver cirrhosis and stuff like that. So the curve showed that it is better to drink moderately than being 100% abstinent. This is where usually people say, if you drink moderately, and we know that moderate consumption, especially in the US, is 2 drinks per day for a man and 1 for women. And this is basically a thing that is carried through all the studies, through all the articles that talk about the beneficial parts of red wine. 2 drinks per day, according to the US and also some countries in Europe. And this has been also the recommendation of the WHO before they changed it to, there's no safe amount in 2023, 2 glasses per day for a whole year. Means 250 milliliters of red wine per day. That is 80 liters of wine per year. This is moderate consumption in the eyes of the US government. And moderate consumption also showed in that study, in that J curve, that it is better to drink moderately than no alcohol at all. The problem is, and we know this today, there have been some faults, some failures in the study. First of all, there were confounding variables. So they weren't able to distinguish between different influencing factors on the people that have been taking part. For example, abstainers might have been former very, very heavy consumers and drinkers of alcohol. And this wasn't asked. They just filled out the questionnaire. Do you drink? No, I don't drink at all. And then they landed over here and not on the other side of the study. So pre-existing health problems were not considered in this study. The second thing was the so-called selection bias. So how were the people selected? How have they been selected for the study? And there was no random selection. They were picked by the people that made this study. And of course, they tried to be independent, but this doesn't work if it's not a random selection. This is how you work scientifically. Then there was a lack of long-term studies. So what they did is they conducted interviews. They measured the alcohol consumption at a single point of time, but they didn't look on the change, the following effects over a longer period. So this is also something that really contributed to this study, let's say in a bad way. And the last thing is, of course, they didn't consider the change of drinking habits. So when you have been a really heavy consumer and 2 weeks later you were part of the study, this has changed, or vice versa, you have never drank any alcohol, and then you were part of the study, but you started drinking half a year ago, heavy drinking, this is also a thing. So those 4 factors contributed to this study. So in the end, you can say this study is worthless. It showed some effect, but just with what we know today, if this would have been your master thesis, you wouldn't have passed your exam today. If you look on this in a really scientific way, can this be representative? Can this be used? I guess most of people working in science would say no. Let's have a look on the other one. The next study, the resveratrol thesis or claim, says that wine contributes resveratrol. And resveratrol is good for your body, it's good for your cells, it's good for your brain, and it's good for your cardiovascular system and for your blood pressure. There's a really good summary of this in an article. When polyphenols are extracted from red grapes, especially from the skins, or from red wine, they exert beneficial effects. But the amount of wine that is needed to cause those beneficial effects, to get enough resveratrol to produce significant effects for blood pressure, for your cardiovascular system, is incompatible to the toxic effect you get with the consumption of alcohol. You have to drink so much wine, to put it on point, you have to drink so much wine to get a beneficial effect of the resveratrol that the alcohol has a bigger influence on your body in a toxic way. And also, in addition, the study showed that a moderate consumption of alcohol is associated with slightly reduced death rate from heart attack, because there is a positive effect, but it also is associated with an increased death rate from cancer, liver cirrhosis, and of course car accidents. And I guess this is a really tough choice, isn't it? And the third one is the so-called French paradox. And what is behind this study is, the authors of this study observed that French people had a high consumption of saturated fat, and yet their mortality for coronary heart diseases was low because of the higher intake of saturated fat. In the US and the UK, where the consumption of saturated fat was substantially equivalent to France, the mortality for CHD was much higher. And they call this French paradox because they discovered that in France there is something slightly different. The wine and the cheese consumption in France is higher. So to summarize this, they looked at the UK, looked at data from France and from the US, and they saw that similar people with a similar intake of saturated fat had a huge difference in the death rates through the CHD. In the US and the UK, it was much higher than in France, and in their eyes, the only difference, or the main difference, was the consumption of red wine because of the resveratrol, guys. Remember the study we talked about a second ago. And then there was striking data from the 3 different cities in France itself. The CHD mortality per 100,000 men was much lower in Toulouse compared to Strasbourg and Lille, in spite of cheese consumption being higher, and wine consumption in Toulouse was also significantly higher. compared to the other cities. So just looking at the data of France, they discovered that in the cities where the wine consumption is higher, the CHD rate was even lower. And this was their conclusion to say red wine is good for your health. You get it? The causality doesn't work. It's like the mushroom thing. So basically, the three main studies that are the base of the argumentation that wine is healthy are demonstrably wrong. And I can't believe that there are still doctors on the internet, PhDs, that claim that wine is healthy, and they use those studies because they should know better. And the article that really made me freak the hell out was an article from Wine Plus in Germany. It is written by a doctor, Dr. Daniel Bulut. And if you Google him, you discover that he's a cardiologist. And he wrote this article in Wine Plus with the name, Which Positive Effects Wine Has on Your Health. And he started his article again with, even the ancient Greeks and Romans knew that wine can have a beneficial effect on health. And he works with all those studies. And it's weird enough that he didn't study the base of the studies that show the healthy effect on wine. He should know better because, he knows about the effects of resveratrol and stuff, but he should also know about the effects of alcohol itself as a substance, as a toxin, as a poison for your body. But in the end, he has two really, really weird and, in my opinion, wrong and sad examples for the use of alcohol. You should drink a glass of sparkling wine or wine before an exam because alcohol causes the blood vessels to expand. The brain is supplied with better blood and performs better. And don't forget, wine has a calming effect on stressed exam candidates. Seriously? He tells people to drink alcohol before a really important exam to calm them down? It is proven by science that there is a bad effect of alcohol on your brain because your thinking starts to slow down, your reactions are slowing down, everything is slowing down. Of course, you calm down, but you calm down your whole body, you calm down your brain, you calm down everything. And of course, then there is this intoxication as well. So you get slightly dizzy and stuff. You don't want to walk into an exam like that. Who is this doctor? This is crazy, guys. We can talk about wine as part of culture, and we do that in a second. It's really important, and it's a lovely product. We all love wine. If you listen to this podcast, I guess you're a wine lover, and this is totally fine. But you cannot be a doctor, go on the internet and tell people to drink alcohol before an exam because it calms you down if you're nervous. That is stupid. And when you talk to conscious winemakers, it doesn't matter if they work organically or conventional, it doesn't matter. But if they have their three things together, let's put it like this, they know. And they also tell people that it's a bad idea to drink much alcohol. And we all know that the alcohol consumption is decreasing, that the demand is going down. And we should work with that in a positive way. We can do storytelling, we can talk about culture, but we also should enlighten our society that moderate drinking, that mindful drinking less but better is a good thing, is a better alternative than just drinking a shitload of wine. And it's like the example with the mushrooms. When you jump from a high building, the adrenaline is kicking in and you get this super hype feeling, but without a parachute, you're dead. You know what I mean? It's Calm down, Alex. Calm down. Is alcohol consumption healthy? No, it isn't. Is wine a great product? Yes, it is. So taking this into consideration, we should think about the following. Maybe we don't want to live to be 100 years old, and we would rather enjoy life from time to time, having a glass of wine, some people together, drinking a little alcohol and be out of the ordinary. That is our own decision, and we should respect this with all our fellow human beings. Wine in particular is a cultural asset and has always been part of culture and of our lives over thousands of years. With all that, what we know today, there is two very, very important things. First, alcohol consumption leads to many side effects, short-term hangovers, headaches, stuff like that, and in long-term, especially with excessive consumption, to problems, to liver cirrhosis, to depression, and to death. And on the other hand, number two, a life without enjoyment is a boring life. So we should find the balance between the two things. And it's just important that we accept when human beings don't want to drink alcohol, they have never drunk alcohol, or they simply just don't want to at all. The reasons for this are irrelevant. Acceptance is the key. This applies to humans as well to our society, to press, and to the wine industry in general. So what I want to say is, if you decide to drink wine because you love the product, because it's part of culture, it's part of society, please do so. Drink mindfully, enjoy the product, and if this is your conscious decisions, I'd rather live until the age of 70, 75, maybe 80. It's my personal decision because I want to enjoy life. And in addition, if there is people saying, I don't want to drink, I stopped drinking, I have never drunk any alcohol, just accept that and don't try to convince them. Especially with Gen Z, we see the development that they don't want to drink alcohol anymore. And we should just accept that and offer alternatives without alcohol that are also able to give them the enjoyment they want. And there are so many great products that can do so. I wish you a very great week. Enjoy whatever you want. Have a glass of whatever. Enjoy the second semi-final if you're watching the Euro 24 tonight. See you on Wednesday with the weekly update. Ciao, ciao.